Odyssey's going back to school, and we've got all the supplies you need, like A-plus exclusive music stations and podcasts to help you or your student excel. Wake up and get the school day started with Acoustic Sunrise, the best mix of acoustic pop. Hit the books with Classical Odyssey, passionate classical music to help you focus while you study. Listen to essential school podcasts like Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips for Better Writing, and be inspired with TED Talks Daily. Get back to school with new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts on Odyssey.
The climate crisis is here. Time's slipping away to stop the worst effects of global warming, and we need solutions. Hosted by me, Molly Wood, How We Survive dives deep into the economics, the tech, and the human stories behind those solutions. From billionaires trying to monopolize lithium mines to business rivalries so fierce that one CEO was dragged off a plane by federal authorities. How We Survive, following the money to the end of the world because our survival might depend on it. Listen on Odyssey and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The Minnesota Vikings appeared to have righted the ship a bit, beating Seattle at U.S. Bank Stadium. Now Cleveland comes to town tomorrow. And if you looked at that schedule on paper up front and said, hey, after the first four, the Vikings will be 2-2, you would probably take that. Now, granted, they opened on the road at Cincinnati. Then they had tough test in Arizona, two winnable games, of course, that they didn't win. And then they took down Seattle. Kirk Cousins with a terrific performance last Sunday in the home opener. But if they're able to beat Cleveland tomorrow, 2-2 in the first four, that is acceptable and certainly keeps them in the mix in the NFC North. And to do a little bit deeper dive on that topic is Matthew Collar from Purple Insider. And Matthew, always good to visit with you. I enjoy your work.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. You beat Cleveland tomorrow, and all of a sudden you're 2-2. And with a look at the early schedule, I think most Viking fans, while not thrilled with 2-2, would accept 2-2.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what it would say more than anything if they were to beat Cleveland is that those first two games were fluky, because that's kind of what they're resting on, right? When they lose one game because of a fumble that maybe was or wasn't a fumble, and then the next game is a kicker missing at the end, then you could sort of say, hey, we're better than what our record says, which, Bill Parcells' classic you are what your record is kind of thing goes out the window when you have those close games and you feel like, oh, it's a longer season now with 17 games. They led 7 teams in the playoffs. We've got plenty of time to bounce back. And so if you were to get wins against better opponents in week 3 and 4, go to 2-2, and also against a team that's really good in Cleveland, that has one of the most stacked rosters in the NFL, has the coach of the year from last year, a guy that everyone in Minnesota knows how impressive Kevin Stefanski is, an up-and-coming quarterback, a team with hype in Cleveland that just sacked the Bears 9 times last week and should be coming in here as a very confident team. I think it's one of those sort of slingshot wins that, if you get, there's a boost of confidence and you go into the next section of games feeling like, yeah, that's who we really are. Not the team from week 1 that jumped off sides a bunch of times and got behind and couldn't come back and win, but rather the team that is very difficult to beat at home, a team that, has a really explosive offense that we've seen, over the last couple of weeks. So I think that there's definitely more to it than just a regular W here. There are some wins in a season that mean more to the way the rest of the season is going to go, and that could be this one. But then the other side of the coin is not great. 1-3, there's no talking yourself into, well, this, that, and the other thing at 1-3. That means the pressure gets ramped right back up again.
Yeah, so huge game tomorrow, goes without saying, with Cleveland in town. And you brought up that roster, you brought up the coaching staff. But let's talk about the Vikes and focus on Kirk Cousins. Universal praise for Kirk Cousins, particularly coming out of that win over Seattle.
Yeah, and very much deserved. I mean, that was as good as he's played as a Minnesota Viking. And, you go back to Arizona as well, where he put on a very good performance. And in both of those games, he was aided by good offensive line play, which there's not too many times that I could have told you on a Saturday last week they played great on the offensive line, over the last few years. And, so there's reasons to think that Kirk Cousins can continue this. They've had KJ Osborne emerge as a number 3 wide receiver. Clint Kubiak, I think, has modernized their offense a little beyond what it was under Gary Kubiak last year. That was a big question coming into the season, how he would adapt as a play caller and as an offensive coordinator, and he's done a terrific job, especially helping Kirk Cousins avoid pressure. I mean, last week, Cousins was one of the fastest quarterbacks at getting the ball into his hands and out of his hands, which has not always been the case since he's been a Minnesota Viking. So now he goes up against a defensive line that is extremely, extremely good in Cleveland, and that's sort of been Kirk Cousins' kryptonite, right? When the other team can create pressure against him, when he feels anxious in the pocket. You know, earlier this week, Dalvin Cook said, when Kirk Cousins has a clean pocket, he's the best quarterback in the game. And it's not actually statistically a crazy thing to say. He really is truly one of the best quarterbacks in the league when he's kept clean. But when he's pressured, he's not. And so that will be something that I think is a really good way to test if there's something different here with Cousins that can be sustained through the rest of the season, or if it's kind of the same deal as what we've seen from Cousins in the past. One
other point, home field advantage. Is that been a factor in this start? I get the sense it is, that maybe fans being back at U.S. Bank Stadium really helped carry this group to a must-win over Seattle.
Yes, that's a really interesting question, and it was something that I looked into for an article last week, and I interviewed an odds maker about this, we have not really seen across the NFL a huge home field advantage this year. I think that actually teams are 24-24, the home team or away team winning, but wow. U.S. Bank Stadium is just different, though, and even Vegas tends to give a little extra boost for U.S. Bank Stadium. At the same time, though, I mean, Russell Wilson came out in the first half, and they put up 17 points, and they were rolling, and it was really the Vikings' offense, which doesn't get much home field advantage outside of it being quiet, but the offense kept the Seattle offense off the field. I mean, the Vikings had the ball for almost the entire second half of the game, and so how much it helps, I'm not sure. This will be Baker Mayfield's first time here, but he's also played really well, like at Kansas City and other places that are loud environments. But, I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt, would be the way that I'd put it. And I think there's a little extra intimidation factor that goes into U.S. Bank Stadium than a lot of stadiums around the league.
Everson Griffin, that's another pretty good story developing for the Minnesota Vikings early this season.
Yeah, no, I think so. And, coming off of a very scary incident where he was in a car accident and had to miss the game in Arizona, and then to come back and get a sack and look good. I mean, I think he's kind of a swing guy to this defense, too, because even though they buckled down when they needed to in the second half, overall, the Vikings defense has not been all that great, and it's been especially suspect in the run-stopping game. And DJ Wanham, who I think they wanted to step up, we haven't seen a whole lot from, and it wouldn't surprise me if now we kind of go into Everson Griffin mode where he's playing all the time. And last week he certainly looked like he had that burst that he's always had, that sort of violent jump that tackles don't know how to deal with. So I think we'll see actually more of him. I think he had something like 34 snaps last week. We might see him get 40, 50 this week in a game that carries huge importance.
All right, let's get an update on the special teams. There's been a lot of attention on Greg Joseph in the kicking game and some big opportunities missed. But beyond that, there has been improvement. We talked before the season, after that game in Kansas City, and, what does it matter? It's a preseason. But there had to be improvement. Beyond the miss that everyone still feels the sting from that miss, there has been improvement in the special teams, and I would assume statistically it bears it out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the kicking has definitely been better so far. Now, I would also say that, Dan Bailey started out last season okay, and then the wheels came off later, so you never really do know with Vikings kickers when it's going to happen. Yep. But Greg Joseph is a really interesting guy to talk to because I think all kickers try to be even-keeled, but he takes even-keeled to a completely different level. And, I think that what he showed last week is, all kickers are going to miss kicks. Sometimes it's at inopportune times that cost you a game. If he missed a 38-yarder in the first quarter, we probably would have forgot about it, right? But at the end of the game, we all noticed a lot more. But I think that he's shown that he could be a very good kicker, and he's even made some other pressure kicks from beyond 50 before. I think the one area where the special teams remains underwhelming is the return game. Cordero Patterson and Marcos Sherrills, these guys have not been. D.D. Westbrook is averaging 5 yards a return, which is 26th in the league. We haven't basically seen any kick returns because they just don't take them out very often anymore, and most of the time it's kicked through the back of the end zone. So that's sort of been non-existent. But I do think they made a great move in picking up Jordan Berry as opposed to sticking with Britton Colquitt at punter. His punt at the end of the game last week was incredible, and he's had some other punts that have gone 55, 60 yards that have really sort of swung the field position. So I think it's been a massive improvement, but they still need to add something in the return game to give them a little extra boost.
Matthew Collar joining us, Purple Insider. You find it online. We'll have more on that before we say goodbye. But Matthew, the Kevin Stefanski factor, very familiar with what, in general, the Vikings are trying to do. How much of a factor is that tomorrow?
I think it's a pretty big factor. Of course you're going to hear, the Vikings say, oh, no, it's no big deal. We know him, he knows us, and that sort of thing. But it's not exactly an even matchup when it comes to that because, it's the NFL in 2021 offense is going to drive the success. And I think that Kevin Stefanski, knowing how Mike Zimmer operates, knowing how his defense operates, what great offensive minds can do is sort of manipulate the rules that the defense has. And Kevin Stefanski is as good as it comes when you talk about using like misdirections and play actions and motions and all those things that creative offenses use. And that'll be something to watch for. But then there is the sort of like how much different do you want to be if you're Kevin Stefanski from the offense that you had here. So, I think the scariest factor is probably the fact that Odell Beckham is back and he's healthy and their running backs are really good and their offensive line is really good. Stefanski certainly matters in this, and I have a great deal of respect for him, and I think any player or coach that you talk to feels the exact same way, that he's earned it. A guy who was here for 14 years and grinded his way all the way to getting a head coaching job in Cleveland, and he's one of the good offensive minds in the league. But more than anything, it's like their roster is really good. They drafted high for a long time. They had cap space to spend, and they, went out and signed free agent players and made the trade for Beckham and everything. And they've built up a really good team. So I think if the Vikings defense is going to show that it's good, now would be a good time to start.
Yeah, and when we were getting ready to go on the air, Matthew, the Vikings have elevated guard Dakota Dozier and cornerback Perry Nickerson to the active roster from the practice squad. Don't know if that's going to be a factor, but nevertheless, a little news from the Vikings ahead of the game tomorrow. By the way, Cleveland favored by 2. The over-under that I saw a moment ago, if you're into that sort of thing, sits at 51.5. So that's the status on the game. By the way, how do people get involved in Purple Insider? I'm a subscriber. How do people do it?
Yeah, if you go to purpleinsider.substack.com, you can get the newsletter in your email inbox every day, including a couple articles we got coming out tomorrow, and the Purple Insider podcast. Just type in Purple Insider wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Matthew, always good to visit with you and Sam and the crew at Purple Insider.
Yep, thanks for having me.
All right, there he is, Matthew Collar, ahead of tomorrow's Vikings-Browns game. And high noon, a big one.
Keeping up with the flood of news every single day can be quite stressful. There is climate change happening. There's the pandemic, labor movements, Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend. Hi, I am Gideon Resnick, host of Crooked Media's What a Day. Each week, Travelle Anderson, Priyanka Arabindi, Josie Duffy Rice, and I are going to break down the biggest news stories of the day in a way that hopefully doesn't always make you want to cry. New episodes of What a Day drop every weekday at 5 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Odyssey's going back to school, and we've got all the supplies you need, like A+ exclusive music stations and podcasts to help you or your student excel. Wake up and get the school day started with Acoustic Sunrise, the best mix of acoustic pop. Hit the books with classical Odyssey, passionate classical music to help you focus while you study. Listen to essential school podcasts like Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips for Better Writing, and be inspired with TED Talks Daily. Get back to school with new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts on Odyssey.
There was stories of these girls that would leave his house and they would have to swim out in the lake and get away from them. He has a secret, like the secret room in his house. He put me in there, she said. I don't want anybody to die anymore. I don't want anybody else to die. I'm looking for Ashley.
Season 3 of Up and Vanished is available right now. Listen for free on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.